Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. Today we're going to be exploring, Alice Sebold's The Lovely Bones. A book that, tackles, such a tough subject, the murder of a young girl, but, does so in such a way that, I think a lot of people find incredibly insightful and even graceful. And what I think is, maybe even more interesting is that it's told from the perspective of the victim, Susie Salmon, who watches over, her family and friends from what's described as her own personal heaven.
Yeah, it's like a unique approach. Instead of the story being kind of a traditional crime thriller, Siebold invites us into Susie's afterlife. Where she's really grappling with her own death, and simultaneously observing the huge impact that her absence has had on those that she left behind.
Right. And speaking of Susie's, afterlife or heaven, let's unpack that idea a little bit. It's not the stereotypical fluffy cloud scenario
Right.
either.
Right. Not quite.
Hmm.
I think Siebold paints Susie's heaven as a place that reflects her own individual desires, almost like a, dreamscape where she can conjure up anything she wants. There are, meadows filled with her favorite flowers, glimpses of her old school, even a yearning for her first kiss. But, it's also tinged with this, constant awareness of what she's lost,
Yeah.
the life that, she can no longer live.
So it's almost like a paradise with an undercurrent of melancholy.
Exactly. And
Mhm.
it's not static either. As Susie kind of navigates, the complex emotions of grief and anger and confusion, her heaven evolves and expands, to kind of reflect her inner journey. Take, for instance, her encounter with Holly, another girl who was also murdered.
Right. Yeah, that stood out to me as well. It's like even in the afterlife, there's a need for connection and shared experience, especially when dealing with, such trauma. Right.
Absolutely. And that shared understanding, kind of creates space for solace and healing that they wouldn't find anywhere else. It's as though Siebold is suggesting that, even in death, we seek out those who can empathize with our, deepest pain.
And speaking of profound experiences, let's talk about the impact that Susie's death has on her family, each member kind of wrestling with grief in their own unique way.
It's almost unbearable to witness, even as readers. Susie's mother, Abigail, she retreats into herself, seeking escape in fleeting affairs and eventually abandoning her family altogether. Her father, Jack, becomes consumed by this, desperate search for the killer, clinging to any shred of evidence that might bring him closer to, understanding what happened. It's heartbreaking, isn't it? And yet Siebold, presents their grief not as a weakness, but as this raw and honest, human response to unimaginable loss. Abigail's actions, however flawed, are driven by a need to escape the suffocating, reality of her grief. There's this vivid image of her driving aimlessly at night as if she could outrun the pain if she just, kept moving.
And then there's Jack, who seems to believe that if he can just solve the mystery of Susie's death, he can somehow bring her back. He collects items that belong to Mr. Harvey's other victims, a shoe, a piece of jewelry, a letter, and he counts these objects obsessively as though by touching them he can somehow, touch the memory of Susie.
It really speaks to the power of tangible objects to connect us to loved ones,
Yeah.
especially in the face of loss.
Yeah.
Those seemingly insignificant items become, imbued with immense emotional weight, serving as this, physical link to a past that can no longer be accessed.
And then we have Lindsay, Susie's younger sister, forced to navigate her own adolescence while, grappling with the shadow of her deceased sister.
Yeah, her journey is so poignant. On the one hand, she's trying to, figure out who she is separate from the tragedy. But on the other hand, she stumbles upon this photograph taken by Susie that reveals this hidden side to their mother, forcing Lindsay to reevaluate their entire relationship.
That photograph becomes a powerful symbol, doesn't it? It highlights how our memories and perceptions of others can be so subjective and how a single discovery can, completely reshape our understanding of the past.
Precisely. It raises questions about, the nature of truth and memory itself. Can we ever truly know another person? And how do our own biases and experiences, color the way we remember events?
And and we can't forget about Buckley, the youngest sibling. He's just a child trying to grasp the concept of death, believing that Susie has simply gone away and will eventually come back. His innocent attempts to, make sense of her absence are both endearing and heartbreaking.
His struggle really embodies the way that children, grapple with complex ideas,
Hmm.
often clinging to this, simple, hopeful narrative, even in the face of overwhelming evidence to the contrary.
The way Siebold portrays each family member's individual journey through grief is incredibly powerful. It's not a neat and tidy process. It's messy, it's unpredictable, and ultimately deeply human.
And what's fascinating is how she weaves together, these individual experiences to create this tapestry of shared loss, highlighting, the interconnectedness of the Salmon family, even as they're being pulled apart by their grief.
So we've explored Susie's unique heaven and the devastating impact her death has on her family. But, it's not just her immediate circle that's affected, is it? A Sebold also delves into the impact that Susie's absence has on her friends, each grappling with guilt and confusion and a profound sense of loss.
You're right. We see Clarissa, Susie's best friend, consumed by guilt over this seemingly insignificant argument they had before Susie's disappearance.
Mhm.
It speaks to that universal experience of replaying past interactions with someone we've lost,
Mhm.
wondering if we could have done something different.
It's that what if that can linger for years, a constant reminder of the fragility of life and the weight of unspoken words.
And then there's Ruth, who possesses this almost mystical sensitivity to the spiritual world. She has visions of Susie, and her ability to sense places where women have died, adds this eerie supernatural element to the story.
It's as though Susie's spirit is woven into the very fabric of the town, felt by those who were closest to her, even if they can't see her.
Precisely. And then we have Racing, Susie's classmate, who had a crush on her. His life path is forever altered by her death, as he carries the weight of her memory and the unanswered questions surrounding her disappearance.
It's a reminder that the ripples of such a traumatic event extend far beyond the immediate family, impacting friends, acquaintances, even those who only knew the victim in passing.
Absolutely. And it's through these, interconnected narratives that Sebold demonstrates the far-reaching consequences of violence, highlighting the complexities of grief and the enduring power of memory.
It's amazing how, Sebold manages to create this like really intricate web of, interconnected lives, each one touched by Susie's absence in, a different way. But let's maybe shift our focus back to Susie's, experience in heaven. You mentioned earlier that, her heaven evolves as she processes her emotions. Can you elaborate on that a little bit more?
Yeah, absolutely. So in the beginning, Susie's heaven is very much centered on, her earthly desires, the things she misses, the experiences that, she craves. But as she kind of confronts, her anger, her confusion, and the, sheer injustice of her death, her heaven expands to encompass something much deeper.
Yeah, I'm particularly struck by the scene where Susie, encounters the spirit of Flora Hernandez and another victim of Mr. Harvey. It's a pivotal moment for her, wouldn't you say?
Well, it's a huge turning point for sure. Up until this point, Susie has been, somewhat isolated in her grief, even with Holly by her side. But meeting Flora, someone who, truly understands the depths of her pain, allows her to connect on a whole new level. It's a shared experience of trauma that transcends even the boundaries of life and death.
And it's through this connection that, Susie begins to let go of some of that anger and bitterness that she's been carrying.
Exactly. Flora helps Susie understand that holding on to those negative emotions will only keep her tethered to the past, preventing her from, finding peace in her new existence. There's a beautiful line in the book where Flora says to Susie, "You have to let go of the hate. It's the only way you can fly."
It's such a powerful message and one that really resonates with Susie. She realizes that while her life on Earth was, tragically cut short, her existence in heaven is not defined by that loss.
And and this realization is mirrored in a tangible way as Susie's heaven transforms. It becomes less about, recreating her earthly desires and more about exploring the, boundless possibilities of her new reality. There's a scene where Susie finally visits her grandfather in heaven and they dance together under the stars. It's a moment of pure joy, symbolizing her, acceptance and her newfound sense of belonging.
Ugh, that scene always gets to me. It's as though she's finally letting go of the earthly ties that have been, holding her back, allowing herself to embrace the, beauty and wonder of her afterlife.
And as Susie finds peace in her heaven, we see a parallel shift happening back on Earth. The Salmon family, though forever scarred by their loss, begin to take these tentative steps toward healing.
Lindsay gets engaged to Samuel, her first love. It's a symbol of hope, of new beginnings of life continuing even in the face of tragedy.
And Buckley, who was so young when Susie died, begins to mature and find his own ways of, coping with his grief. Remember that scene where he plants Susie's clothes in the garden?
Yes, such a poignant image. It's as though he's trying to nourish the earth with her memory, allowing something beautiful to grow out of something so painful.
It speaks to the resilience of the human spirit, the ability to, find meaning and beauty even in the darkest of circumstances.
Yeah.
And even Susie's parents, who seem so utterly broken by her death, find a fragile path towards reconciliation.
Their journey is far from easy. It's marked by resentment and anger and the, overwhelming weight of their shared grief. But there's a powerful scene where they reunite at the hospital after Jack suffers a heart attack.
That moment is so raw and vulnerable. It strips away all the defenses that they've built up around themselves and reveals this deep, enduring love that has somehow managed to survive the most devastating of losses.
It's a reminder that, healing is possible even when the wounds seem too deep to mend. But, Sebold doesn't shy away from the complexities of grief. The Salmon family, even as they move forward, will always carry the scars of Susie's absence.
Absolutely. There's that haunting image of Abigail walking alone in the cornfield, the place where Susie was murdered. It's a visual representation of the way grief lingers, how it becomes a part of the landscape of our lives.
And from her heaven, Susie observes her family, understanding that she can no longer, directly influence their life, but can still bear witness to their joys and sorrows.
It's a bittersweet realization, but one that brings her a sense of peace. She's found her place in the afterlife, and she's come to terms with the fact that her loved ones on Earth are finding their own ways to, heal and to move forward.
So while The Lovely Bones is a story about death and loss, it's also a story about the enduring power of love memory and, the human spirit's ability to find hope, even in the darkest of circumstances. But, the novel doesn't just explore the emotional fallout of Susie's death. It also, delves into the secrets that both bind and separate the characters. Secrets seem to play a significant role in shaping their, actions and relationships.
You're absolutely right. Secrets are like hidden currents running beneath the surface of the narrative, influencing the choices characters make and the consequences they face. Take Susie, for instance. She carries a heavy burden of knowing her killer's identity, a secret she's unable to share with her loved ones.
Right, it creates this agonizing tension, this sense of helplessness as she watches her family desperately searching for answers that she already possesses.
Exactly. And then there's Mr. Harvey, the seemingly ordinary neighbor who harbors this monstrous secret. The details about his hidden collection of mementos from his victims are chilling, a reminder that darkness can lurk beneath the most unassuming facades.
And the way he insinuates himself into the investigation, offering condolences and even suggesting suspects, adds another layer of manipulation to his character.
It speaks to the insidious nature of evil, how it can often hide in plain sight, disguised as something, innocuous.
Lindsay also gets caught up in the world of secrets as she embarks on her own investigation into Mr. Harvey. Her pursuit of the truth is both dangerous and empowering, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. It's a way for her to reclaim some sense of agency in a situation where she feels powerless. By uncovering the truth, she's honoring her sister's memory and confronting the darkness that has, invaded her life.
The novel explores this duality of secrets, how they can both isolate us and compel us to act, how they can, burden us with guilt and shame, but also fuel our desire for justice and understanding.
And ultimately, The Lovely Bones suggests that true healing can only begin when secrets are brought to light, when the truth, however painful, is allowed to surface.
It's a powerful message and one that connects to another key theme in the book, the power of memory.
Yes, memory is a driving force throughout the novel. The characters are constantly revisiting the past, trying to make sense of their present through the lens of what has happened before.
We see this most clearly with Lindsay's discovery of Susie's photograph of their mother. It forces her to question everything she thought she knew about Abigail, highlighting the subjectivity of memory and the way our perceptions of the past can be, so easily shattered.
It raises, fascinating questions about whether we can ever truly know another person, whether our memories are reliable, and how our understanding of the past shapes our present reality.
And then there's the, recurring image of the cornfield, the site of Susie's murder. It's not just a physical location, it becomes a symbol, doesn't it?
Absolutely. The cornfield represents both the trauma that continues to haunt the Salmon family and the possibility of, healing and renewal.
Yeah.
It's a place of darkness and sorrow, but also a place where life persists, where the cycle of growth and decay continues.
It's a powerful metaphor for the way grief can both wound us and ultimately lead us towards a deeper understanding of ourselves and the world around us.
And it speaks to the novel's overarching message, that even in the face of profound loss, there is beauty to be found, there are connections to be made, and there is always the possibility of hope.
As we delve deeper into The Lovely Bones, it strikes me that Sebold isn't just, telling a story. She's crafting this really intricate exploration of, the human condition. She's asking us to confront these uncomfortable truths about life and death and the messy, complicated ways we, cope with loss.
I couldn't agree more. The Lovely Bones isn't a book that offers, easy answers or tidy resolutions. Grapples with these profound questions about grief, memory, justice, and the, enduring power of love. It challenges us to consider our own beliefs about, life after death and how we make sense of tragedy.
And she does so with such lyrical prose and vivid imagery. The language itself becomes almost another character in the story, drawing us into, Susie's heaven and the Salmon family's grief and the unsettling world of Mr. Harvey.
Yes, Sebold's writing is both beautiful and haunting. She captures the essence of, teenage longing, the raw agony of parental grief, and the, chillingly ordinary nature of evil.
I'm thinking, for example, about the scene where Susie describes the moment she realizes she's dead. She says, "My name was Salmon, like the fish. First name Susie. I was 14 when I was murdered on December 6, 1973. There's such a stark simplicity to those words, yet they convey the enormity of her loss."
That's a perfect example of how Sebold uses language to create a powerful emotional impact. The straightforwardness of Susie's statement, the absence of embellishment, amplifies the tragedy of her situation. And it's through those seemingly simple words that we as readers are drawn into the heart of the story.
And speaking of, powerful moments, I keep coming back to the ending. It's not a traditional happy ending, is it?
No, it's not. The Salmon family, though they find ways to move forward, will always carry the weight of Susie's absence. There's a profound sense of loss that lingers, a recognition that their lives have been, irrevocably altered.
But amidst that sadness, there's also a glimmer of hope, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. The ending is bittersweet. We see Lindsay and Samuel building a life together, Buckley blossoming into a young man, and even Susie's parents finding a tentative path towards reconciliation.
And from her heaven, Susie witnesses their journeys, offering this poignant perspective on the passage of time and the enduring power of love. She says, "These were the lovely bones that had grown around my absence, the connection sometimes tenuous, sometimes made at great cost, but often magnificent that happened after I was gone. And I began to see things in a way that let me hold the world without me in it."
That passage perfectly encapsulates the novel's message of resilience, acceptance, and the enduring nature of human connection. Even in death, Susie finds a sense of peace, recognizing that her loved ones are finding their own ways to heal and create meaning in a world without her physical presence.
The Lovely Bones is a book that stays with you long after you've finished reading it. It sparks conversations, challenges assumptions, and invites us to contemplate the profound mysteries of life and death.
It's a testament to the power of storytelling, the way fiction can illuminate the darkest corners of human experience while simultaneously offering glimpses of hope, resilience, and the enduring beauty of the human spirit.
Well, listener, this has been a truly insightful deep dive into the complex and thought-provoking world of The Lovely Bones. We've explored the unique narrative perspective, the devastating impact of grief, the allure and danger of secrets, the power of memory, and the enduring strength of the human spirit.
It's a novel that invites multiple readings each time, revealing new layers of meaning and prompting further reflection on the themes that resonate most deeply with each reader.
Thank you for joining us on this journey, and we hope you'll continue to explore the questions and insights that The Lovely Bones has to offer.